manufacturing sector, and of course also issues related to agriculture. We know for sure that the drivers of our economy lies within three sectors, which is manufacturing, agriculture, mostly, and of course backed up by our other institutions. And of course, we are grappling with a lot of issues in the economy because first of all, when UDA, Kenya Kwanza, came into power, they actually promised to uplift the hustlers by expanding the economy, all right, and bridging the inequalities. That is the gap between the poor and the rich. And of course, we've seen that the widening of this gap has even grown bigger. We've seen people suffering. I come from Kawangware, and my people walk to work every single day, even when it's raining, because they cannot afford 50 shillings fare to go and look for jobs in industrial area, in Westlands, and all over. So does then this mean that the economy is doing well? First of all, what are the indicators of an economy doing well? We should be seeing the manufacturing sector thriving. But of course, data from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers says that the sector has been dwindling, actually from contributing 10.9% to GDP to now contributing only 7.6% to GDP. So that is a shrinkage. And this has been attributed to international manufacturing firms and factories actually exiting the market to better markets that offer better pricing mechanisms in their electricity and even better mechanisms in their taxation regimes. And talking about the cost of electricity, Ayub, according to the international standards, we are told that for our products to be competitive, the electricity has to be priced at 0.09 kilowatt per hour. And looking regionally, because we have to do comparative analysis, in Egypt, power is sold to manufacturing and industries at $0.06 per kilowatt hour. In Ethiopia, our next door neighbor, is at $0.02 per kilowatt hour. And in South Africa, it's at 0.07. Guess what it is for Kenya? In Kenya, we sell our electricity to manufacturing firms at $0.17 per kilowatt hour. You can imagine that they have hit the cap, they have hit the ceiling, because the ceiling is at $0.09. So what does this mean? That the cost of electricity in this country is untenable for business. Businesses cannot thrive in this economy. That is why people are moving to Ethiopia and Tanzania to do business. So then this translates to the economy because people are going to lose jobs. Our youth are not going to get employment. Look at agriculture, Ayub. They are saying that the only thing they've done for agriculture is the subsidized fertilizer. I mean, we do not even have a resilient agricultural landscape. We do not have a structured framework for our agricultural sector. So telling us that you have reduced the prices of flour to indicate that agriculture is doing well is wrong. You know, because how many people are actually, you know, dealing with agriculture as a form of employment? Because averagely, agriculture is done by about people who are about 60 years old. What about the young people?
Who are not involved?
Who are not involved. How are we going to involve them in agriculture?
And Tunen, is the state of economy as spelled out yesterday by the head of state a reflection of what Kenyans are going through, given a reduction in spending power purchase and the inflation is down, but you realize there are other indicators which equally do not match up that, and one informs the other. Inflation can go up or can go higher, given on one international development, and the situation across Europe is very volatile. Donald Trump is coming back to the White House. I mean, how can this be sustained from the common man's perspective to have more money in his or her pocket?
Thank you very much, Ayub. You'll understand, and if you listen to the president yesterday, he first acknowledged that we do understand that money has reduced from the pockets of Mwananchi. But it doesn't mean that we are where we were before. You remember he stated from the time he took over from 2022 up to now, there has been progress. It doesn't mean that we are yet where we wanted to be as at this time because of the challenges that came in, because he also highlighted that the challenges in the war in Europe and famine at the time. I think there was a time we had a really bad famine. Then they came the floods. So these affects how we operate every day. And as my sister here has said, you know, we cannot look at the economical growth only on manufacturing. We have also the sectors of agriculture, and elaborately the president stated about, I think it was 4 issues on agriculture. He touched on the coffee, he touched on the dairy farming, he touched on the sugar, and also he touched on the maize production. And those are our key productions in Kenya. Those are key agricultural sectors that we involve in. And his focus, and since he came into power, he said, we cannot subsidize consumption anymore. Let us subsidize production so that the yields are more than what we had before. And this, he outlined the bags of maize that have been able to be yielded, the coffee sale, I think the dairy farm. So those are the key indicators that we are not doing as bad as it was before. And I believe that focus on strategic sectors in the economy, and the inflation. Remember, we also indicated that since February, when we were at 162 shillings per dollar, I mean the cost of the dollar, we are now at 129. That means that with a stable economy, we are able to improve as a country. And I think people soon, and we are not there yet. And Kenyans, we are used to measuring our indicators of economic growth with the basic commodities. You remember people said the last time there were maandamano that were fueled from, I think it was Kibra and some other parts of informal sector, that bei ya unga imeenda juu. It was above 200 shillings. Bei ya sukari imepanda juu. It was above, but now we have all these basic commodities reduced to a bare minimum that are able to be purchased.
To what shillings, for example? Can the people still afford that?
Because I did a bulky shopping the last time, so I cannot really tell how much it is at the moment.
So you still cannot categorize yourself as those who are
but from the shelves, you've done this, and I saw you used to do this on TV sometimes. You go and check on the prices of these commodities.
Yeah, but it depends on the different branding as well.
Yes.
But the point is then, is the consumer power purchasing, the question of power purchasing, apply across board? Is what applies for you, what applies for the lady or the gentleman, or who are protesting because of the high cost of living in 2023?
Of course, it cannot be the same because of the different categories of, the earnings. But these are basic commodities. They are in every household. And I believe that when things are easier, it is easy for everyone. It is not easy for the common mwananchi or the guy up there. It can get better for everyone in the economy. So that the reduction in basics, so that when you go to those commodities that are prestigious, it is you who has chosen to do that. But for the basic commodities, I believe that it is easy for everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are we at any better place, advice, given what the president said yesterday and the economic outlook that the government has projected for the past few days?
I think, Ayub, in comparison to the last 2 years, it would be right to say that we have several steps that have been moved forward. Because when this government came in place, one of the biggest complaints of the common mwananchi was the price of unga. Actually, this government campaigned on the promise of unga. And at that time, unga was retailing at above 200 shillings. And the promise was that it will actually come down to 100 or near around there. And when you check the shelves of supermarkets today, and you will be able to find that we have unga that is as low as 95, 99 shillings to as high as about 120 shillings. Of course, we have some of the people who could be wealthy. We also have commodities that are there for the people who want those kind of things. But the truth is we have a reduction in the price of unga, which is a step in the right direction. When I look at the comparison of the shilling to the dollar, the president was actually right, that when they came in, it was actually way beyond 160. Now we are comparing that at about
No, when the president came in, it was at 129, according to the data from the Central Bank of Kenya.
Yes.
But the figure went up.
It went up to over 160.
65, 66.
Yes, but now it's coming back to that stabilization. You look at such kind of things and you're able to see that they are basically, we are not yet, and to borrow his words, we are actually not yet where we want to be, but there are several steps that have actually been taken. When I look at the food security in the country, today we now have quite a number of bags of maize in our reserves that are already there. So we can be able to know that we are not badly off in terms of food security. And as a person who comes from the sugar belt in the western region, I was impressed to know that one, the industries now are actually able to function. They are not at optimum. For instance, the Mumias sugar is not where we people in Western want it to be, because at one point that was quite a firebrand that was able to actually sustain a lot of economies and the households in Western Kenya. It is not yet there yet, but at least now there is progress. So I agree that there has been several steps in the right direction in as far as matters economy are concerned, and as much as affordability of the people to the basic goods. It is actually true that has been able to happen. Of course, we are still grappling with political stability, because again, leadership and politics is a game of perception. Because when the public does not perceive government to be working, it is one of the biggest undoings. Of course, and that was affected by things like the Adani deal, because when you have such a humongous thing that is happening in the wrong direction, it affects the vision of the people and the sight of them to these other things that are working. So the fact that the president is now able to see that issues like the Adani deal are a big problem, I think it now will be able to even aid the vision and the sight of the reality of the things that are actually working in his government. So to answer your question in terms of the economy, yes, I agree that there have been reasonable steps towards the right direction, but more still needs to be done.
Yeah, and Mboto, coming to you, the president at some point defended the Adani in particular, so was the former prime minister. What informs this? I mean, is it lack of knowledge or information, or it's the lack of proper guidance from the concerned technocrats in these respective ministries to brief the head of state and other government officials?
Are you maybe coming from the fact that the president has a vision and actually believe that PPP is the right way to go? That's the right direction for everyone. You can tell from Rwanda what PPP has been able to do for such a country, you know, in the technology and innovation that has been there. So generally the vision was, we want to do something big. We want to be able to rectify what is wrong in our infrastructure. And there is someone that is actually coming in and saying, we can be able to do this for you. And it looks good. It looks like a really good deal, because by the end of the day, it has a longer term repayment period. We could be able to do massive infrastructure to the JKIA and all the other infrastructure system. And this guy on paper, to be honestly speaking, looked good enough. You know, made sense, made economical sense, made investment sense in my analogy. And everyone was rushing into making sure we are able to deliver, because even in UDA we have a manifesto that is based on all these things that actually the president is trying to deliver, and is based on the manifesto and the promises he made for the country. So when that deal came and it looked good on paper, it was something that people had to consider. Yes, and of course, if I'm trying to do something that is massively good, change is always, form some sort of resistance to other people. But you need to look at it proactively. And that is where maybe the president stood firm in understanding. In paper, it looked good for the Kenyans. Maybe the Kenyans are not seeing this vision as I am seeing it in this direction. So let me stick to this decision and see if it's actually going to progress. But then again, when information came, and he was able to look at it in another angle and say, okay, it looks good on paper, but it doesn't actually benefit or doesn't come out very well for the citizen, and was able to do the right thing. So for me, it's about being able to have a vision and saying, I want to move with that direction. You do understand, even entrepreneurs, when you want to do a huge project, everyone is looking at you, you're crazy, you can't run with these things, but you stand firm and say, this is a good deal, this is a good idea for business, and I'm sure it's going to work out. Some of the time when you're even starting a business, people don't even believe in you. But the president was able to stand firm and say, this is best for Kenya. But then again, when information came and actually the numbers were not right and the allegations, of course, really good information that meant that Adani was not good for the public, he was able to say no. So,
and how did this then slip our attention, given that yesterday before the Senate, the senators had questioned the CS Energy Opiyo Wandayi, because the proposal by Adani was to increase our electricity tariff by 1 shilling plus 76 cents thereabout. The other proposal by Africa 50 Energy Group was to 0.76 cents. Certainly there is a difference in terms of the costings here. One was to increase our electricity tariffs, the other wasn't, or was less than the proposal presented by Adani's. How did this slip the attention of technocrats and policy players to the extent that this was a proposal taken to them, but they willingly took it and preferred Adani over another proposal that was lessening our electricity tariff? And in the law, the procurement law says that through the competitive bidding, you also look at the aspect of the costing so that it doesn't have bearing on the common man energy. How do we lose sight of that?
I don't think we lost sight of that. I believe the technocrat looked at it in the economy of scale, in the bigger vision, the bigger picture. The other proposal came introducing, but this other came with a lot of other infrastructural mobility that will be added advantage to the deal. So it had a one package all sort of an agreement. So it made more sense than the other one in my assessment. Yeah. But of course, in that element, we are also trying to improve in the systems of transparency. That because for me, that would be the issue of transparency that was coming in here. And that is why we're saying we're moving everything to the e-procurement system. We are trying to, and corruption is about putting up systems that are not going to allow any other Kenyans to be able to move to that. So maybe when we advance and actually tighten the loops and tighten the opportunities that people can actually be able to overlook these things, is us moving into the direction of making sure we have more transparency and accountability as Kenyans.
Yeah. And Angel, it seems that public participation is certainly a key cog in our governance progress. How fundamental is this, given what we witnessed with the finance bill, which prompted a cabinet, an entire cabinet overhaul, and yesterday the president, during the opening speech of his address, during the opening part of his address, appreciating how emboldened the Kenyan citizenry is?
First of all, I would like to say that I think we're being nice with the Kenya Kwanza government by saying that the Adani deal slipped under their tables, but they knew exactly what they were doing the moment they got into the deal with the Adani. It was not something they did not know. They knew exactly what they were doing. When they're abducting young Kenyans like ourselves here, they don't do they don't need a lot of provocation. They just do a few things here and there, and they're able just to pick you up for one reason or the other if they believe that you're a threat. So I don't think that it slipped under their tables. They knew exactly what they were doing. And when you talk about public participation, I think the public participation that Kenyans understand today is what we saw on June 25th. That is the kind of public participation that Kenyans understand today. Because even with the ongoing public participation conversations on tax reviews and tax amendments, you can clearly see, you can clearly hear the plights of people, the questions they're asking. And then you're going to see these same proposals making it into the final document. And then you wonder what kind of public participation exercises were conducted. At the end of the day, we saw even with the impeachment process, and I'd like to thank the media for shedding light throughout in that entire process. And we saw the kind of submissions that were being made by Kenyans, and then what we got to see go into parliament. And now we need to rethink how we conduct our public participation exercises. We need to understand what are the qualitative and the quantitative aspects of it. What constitutes to public participation? Because the public participation, I understand right now, is going on to the streets, is doing what Gen Zs did on June 25th. Because public participation has become just a formality. It's just something we are still going to do, and whether you like it or not, mpende msipende, we are still going to go through with what we want to go through with. So public participation is an item that policymakers, legislators, and Kenyans, we need to come back to and revise, because it is a very crucial element that throughout the Building Bridges initiative, it has taken out so many other policy issues, and it's also being used to take advantage of getting some certain policy amendments into our laws. So we need to really rethink our public participation exercise and how we quantify public participation.
Yeah. And Mukile, what is the view of all these happenings and events in the country from the diaspora perspective for young Kenyans?
Just to start with, I watched the president's report, his report to the parliament. And to be honest, the diasporans feel left out. The stabilization of the country's economy, and even as my colleagues are talking about the shilling dropping from all the way, must be recommended that diaspora participated in a long way. As we speak today, Ayub, Kenyans in the diaspora, they're sending close to 650 billion Kenya shillings at this time. That exchange, as the president said, the foreign exchange reserve has risen from 2.6 to almost 9.6 billion. The diaspora and the greatest contributors. And even a single recognition in the president's speech to parliament, telling the parliamentarians that we have Kenyans who live in the diaspora and they have really been doing a lot for this country. Our economy has been supported by the Kenyans in the diaspora. So they view that from the head of state, they feel at onset they have been left out, you know. So the diasporans, they will feel very disappointed with the goings in the country, but they want to be appreciated of what they are doing. Today, Ayub, we have a State Department for Diaspora Affairs. It is the most underfunded State Department in this Kenya Kwanza government. Even the officers in the State Department cannot even push for some of the changes in the diaspora. The president talked about issues with the security and things like that, about jobs, creating jobs, over 100,000 going in the diaspora, Kenyans have been going. But he didn't even say, as much as we are doing that, he's also addressing the plights of Kenyans in the diaspora. Our young people, our young girls in the Saudi and the whole Middle East, they're still suffering. When I was coming from the US, I flew through Saudi, and the whole aircraft actually, majority, 80% were Kenyans from Saudi, and they were singing. They were happy. That was not a good thing, because they talk about the plights they're going through. And being a Kenyan citizen in the diaspora, as the country is supposed to protect us, even if we are being employed anywhere in the world. So I feel, on the view of what the president presented, he left out the diaspora factor, and I felt that, personally, I felt it wasn't good, because the president is very close to the diaspora. I've worked with the UDA when it comes to the diaspora affairs issues, and by that, yesterday, I think Kenyans in the diaspora felt left out. Yeah. But on the economy side of it, I believe it's a progress. There has been progress in our economy. The digital economy, for example, it wasn't a major factor in the previous regimes. But this, under President Ruto's government, there has been a lot of work that's been done in the digital economy. The young people actually today, they can be able to do their art, do whatever they can do, and actually earn something. So the digital space and digital economy is really helping the young people, both in the country and outside the country.
And Nora, another fundamental point that the president yesterday highlighted were cases of extrajudicial killings, abductions, and enforced disappearances. It's snowballed from what was a rather domestic problem to now an international one, given what happened to Kizza Besigye and the government's inability to come with clarity about that issue as to how he was taken from Kenya to Uganda, and the charge sheet admitted that he was taken from Nairobi, and even stated the apartment where he was taken from.
Oh, well, Ayub, pertaining the abductions, now I think we can see that we are alive to the fact that there is constant threat to people who don't agree with various governments, that you cannot have a safe haven anywhere you rush to, especially to your neighbors here in Kenya for the case of Kizza, because they will definitely get you abducted and sent back so that you can face your oppressors. And of course, we do not live, in mass. We live here, we exist here. Like Kamala Harris always says that nobody falls from a coconut tree. We exist in this realm, and we've seen over time what the government has been capable of doing. We've seen the weaponization of institutions that are supposed to protect Kenyans from the executive's overreach. So what then we can say is that most of the time, there's always this agreement amongst countries whereby then they can be able to help each other in some way or the other. It's a quid pro quo situation. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. When we had the Gen Z protests, there were allegations that some of the officers in the field might have not been Kenyans, and they might have come from our neighboring countries, and that's just an allegation that I'm pointing out. So this could be the same situation.
Which has not been proven, right?
Yes, it's just an allegation, and I do not have facts to it, because of course we know how clandestine such kind of activities are carried out. People had masks during the Gen Z protest. You could not tell who is an officer and who is not, who is a Kenyan and who is not. But then, of course, practically, we know that with the UN kind of agreements that we have ratified here in the country, we are supposed to be able to take care of people who've been oppressed by various regimes and who are finding it safe to stay here. So then the government has to come out boldly and address this issue. And of course, you know, a precedent has been set. We saw what happened to the Turkey nationals. They were, of course, abducted, put in the airplane and, you know, flown to Turkey to face their oppressors that side. So then, of course, when now this happens to Kiza, then the Kenyans have to look at the same manner in which these matters happened and conclude that this could have been the same machinations that took place.
Yeah, and Tunen, from a human rights perspective, does the state of human rights in our country trouble you?
Going back to the issue of the abductions, as you've pointed out, you know, these are issues, you know, sometimes you will find that they are not really abductions, because we have several issues that have turned out to be arrests by the police, because it's only that the information out there, you don't know where you're being taken, and you end up in a police station. That is an arrest. And subsequently, either you are interrogated.
How is that an arrest if the person who is arresting you does not identify himself? You know, you're an advocate of the High Court, is it?
Ayub, you know, we are not aware of what happened when that person was taken away, because it's only them who will come back and tell us.
But does the manner, as an advocate,
Yes.
as the defender of the rule of law,
yes,
does the manner in which these arrests have been done imbue confidence in you that somebody walks to your car with your family, and I'm here pointing out the case of the former Nandi Hills Member of Parliament, Mr. Keter, that somebody doesn't identify himself or herself, they have no identification numbers, the car they are using, the number plate, if you do a search with the National Transport and Safety Authority, is non-existent, or either is registered in some very funny characters or non-existent proxy companies. How does that then, I mean, be qualified as an arrest? You know,
in the case of former legislator for Nandi Hills, you remember, and I think I remember, he had been summoned several times to the police station. He did not turn himself in. And that informed the police to go look for him.
But what was the manner? I mean, and that was the day, because I'm asking you this, I'm putting you on the spotlight, given that you are an advocate of the High Court, okay? That very same day, the president was interviewed by my colleagues at State House, 30th June. If summoned and you fail to turn up, what's the manner prescribed by the law for the officers to come for you?
Ayub, you know, there are different forms of arrest. This is a person who was a flight risk, because if you fail to honor police summons more than 2 times, what choices do police have? Because, you know, sometimes you come identifying yourself and that kind of person runs away. What do? Sometimes you have to mask yourself. By the time you arrest this person, you inform them that, you know, look, I had been looking for you, you failed to come. And I knew if I come identifying myself that I'm coming for you at this particular time, there's a chance and a risk that that person will evade the police. So some of these things, they're not really abductions. And as you pointed out that, you know, there could be coming with some cars which are unidentified, which cannot be traced in the NTSA data. You know, some of these things, we might not know the reasoning behind why the police would go with such an identified motor vehicle, or well, without uniform, or sometimes mask, because this could be, they are avoiding the risk of losing this person because he has to answer to some allegations or charges. How does driving
a car without a legitimate number plate lead to the avoidance of arrest by someone?
It's not really legitimate. I cannot assert to that fact because
all the number plates, we did a search. I mean, Tunen, this is what we have on record, and for accountability purposes, because Keteru is just but a microcosm of other forceful arrests that never bordered on the law for person to be taken to a police station and thereafter hauled before a court of law. My question was then to you, are you comfortable if advice comes to you, so as Angela and Mr. Mukile here, unidentified, in an identified number-plated car, to come and arrest you? Would you be comfortable?
Not really, because, but he might have known what was coming. Because having had summons several times and having evaded the police several times, although there are legal requirements on how you can arrest someone, you identify yourself. First, you summon this person because you have their details. You summon them to the police station. They fail to come, you go for them. And police are allowed to use some force in arresting when someone tries to resist arrest. But that force cannot be that can hurt someone. But they are allowed under the law to use some kind of force when someone tries to resist arrest. And I believe the police could have gone beyond what was required by law, or they were acting in suspicion that this person was going to evade the police arrest.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in a civil society and in a democracy, that isn't a healthy way of going about the business. Of course, the police and the other disciplined forces are given the tools of violence, but within a prescribed manner.
And let it not be confused that I'm condoning any kind of abductions, because we've seen they've happened in some quarters. It is wrong, it is unlawful to take someone for several days without arraigning them in court, because the Constitution provides that once arrested, you have to arraign someone in a court of law within 24 hours, unless there are very compelling reasons why you did not arraign that person within 24 hours.
And in the compelling cases, the courts must give directions.
Must give directions.
Yes,
because,
advice.
Yes.
Yes, advice. Please proceed.
Thank you, Ayub. I don't know now it's yes to meet on what exactly.
On the topical issue of human rights.
Yeah.
And the dignity of the lives of the Kenyan people, the missing Kenyans, those who have been abducted, cases of extrajudicial killings.
I think, Ayub, especially as a young person, and these cases having happened majorly to young people, it is something that wholesomely all of us must be able to condemn. That you cannot be able to, we cannot be in a country where young people can just disappear and then they cannot be accounted for. I think that must be condemned. But I think that must be condemned. But in that being said, we must also be able to differentiate between an arrest and an abduction. Just as my brother there was trying to say, because we have come to a place where I have seen also circumstances actually where arrests are also being called abductions, because now everything now is actually an abduction. Even when you are taken on traffic, it's now called an abduction. But that difference must be able to be clear. And the police must help us also to make these extremely clear. Like the questions, the follow-up questions you're actually trying to make, my brother, in regard to Nandi Member of Parliament. And you could see it's quite a hard thing to explain. And the police are not supposed to put us in such a hard place. Because in as much as I understand that there is what would be called police operation, but then where there is lack of clarity, they must be able to come out and aid the public to understand. So that then there is no window of imagination. Because then we are, just the same questions you are asking are the same questions I would ask, that why is the car unmarked, and why is this happened, and did these people identify themselves? Yet maybe that is a police operation in some aspect or some sphere. So if it is a police operation and they are mandated to do something, then they must be able to come out and clarify. Because failure to clarify some of these operations is what makes now everything be called an abduction. But then, be that as it may, the process where now young people literally disappear, and we cannot be able to account for them for several days, for months, I think that is extremely unfortunate, and we cannot be able to live in such a country, because we are the ones with the political opinion. We are the ones who want to speak about governance issues. The 6 young people here are basically here to air out their view on what is happening in regard to the governance and the leadership. When it gets to a point where they cannot be sure whether to come to Citizen TV or not, I think that would become a very unfortunate circumstance. So government must be able to come out clear and straight, so that we are able to know that this is an arrest, so that we are not imagining. We are not guessworking, because where we are now, there's a lot of guesswork where we are calling very many things abductions. We might be wrong in some, they might be right in others, but then the Inspector General has to come out and clarify. So then, like the case of, I'm forgetting his name, the one who was able to disappear until the day they got out on the day the Inspector General.
Yeah, the Longton brothers and...
who were able, on the day that the court said,
Jaggi.
yeah, on the day the courts literally summoned the then acting Inspector General, is the same day they were able to then appear. So one wonders, is it a case of coincidence? Is it a case of, so when such things are not explained, then a lot is left to imagination. And when a lot is left to public imagination, the public most often does not imagine on the direction that government would want them to imagine. The public would then imagine those instances towards the other side of argument. So it is important to clarify, and it's important for us to also be able to come out clearly that abductions and such kind of things for young people and anyone in the Republic is extremely unfortunate.
Yes, Angel.
Yeah, Ayub, I thought advice was always speaking for government, but I'm happy he's slowly seeing the light as
I do not work for government.
as times go by.
He has made it clear.
Angel actually works for government.
No, I don't. So
He made clear that he isn't a government official.
So, yeah.
But it bothers him that cases of extrajudicial killings are a concern to him.
Yeah, on that
as it is a concern to many Kenyans.
Yeah, it also concerns me as well. And as you asked that question, does it bother us? I think for me, it torments me that a simple tweet can land you in jail. A simple conversation like this one can land us into jail. I think that's not the Kenya that Kenyans fought for in 1992. And even it's becoming more and more a fear-selling government, because there are now Subarus in churches to listen to sermons, like what used to happen to universities back in the 90s during Moi's era. And now we are seeing that happening to our churches. So there's a lot more going on in terms of talking about abductions and humanitarian advices that are going on with the Kenya Kwanza administration. But then one thing that now brings me to light is that Kenya is at the forefront in diplomatic corridors looking for the chairmanship of the African Union Commission. And Kenya is known to be one of the most democratic, most transparent countries in Africa. And that is the card that Kenya is using to fight for that seat or campaign for that seat. But now we are seeing, even with Turkish nationals, and we are busy looking for votes in the North African belt, and we are looking for votes in the East African community, and we're looking for votes across Africa, and this is what our government is doing. I'm even wondering why, Mr. Odinga should also do his due diligence on the government that is backing him up, because Mr. Odinga has been fighting for the rights, for human rights since he began his politics. But now the same government might just undo him come February 2025, when he's now gunning for the AUC chairmanship, when the moment of truth comes. I think it goes a lot to say when we're talking about these abductions within Kenya, now outside our borders, and even in other international jurisdictions, we are making all the mistakes. And then come February 2025, we're going to ask ourselves, why didn't the African continent support us? These are the mistakes that we are making right at this moment, and we want to shine in the continent. Our country is making mistakes left, right, and center. It is very disappointing that William Ruto and his Kenya Kwanza administration are taking us in this direction, directly and outrightly disrespecting human rights, and especially the plight of young people like myself.
Okay. Yes, Mboto, how is the communication from the UDA quarters regarding cases of human rights and the violations that are happening?
Technically, we cannot be blinded to what is actually happening, and we are very concerned and actually very aware that there are arrests and there are abductions. Yes, and as I would like to point out, one of the most issues that we praise ourselves and be able to do is be able to uphold the rule of law, is be able to leave the judiciary independency for them to be able to run their judicial process very independently. And coming from that is being able for a nation being, Kenyan being in the forefront as being stated as one of the democratic spaces in the forefront in Africa. I think that is a card we also need to understand we are able to do. Why are we being named that? It's because we are able to see that people can be able to speak and talk about anything in Kenya, in the country, in whatever capacity. I mean, when you enter into social media, you can see how everything is being ridiculed or it's being emphasized in a manner that is showing, because that is what a democratic country can be able to do. A democratic can be able to give people space to be able to do that. Yes, there are some gray areas in whereby we do not have any sort of communications, like what Adva is able to say. When you do not have communications, when there is nothing coming through saying what is actually happening, that is where imagination will run to the extremes of ends. But then when such rules of law that have been upholded, when the Inspector General was asked to actually appear in court, did not appear in court, he was expecting the government to backing up. But the government said the judicial system has its own independency and has its own way of doing things, and I cannot sit here and defend you. That for me says that everyone should be able to do their work, and not everything is going to be subjected to scrutiny in the Ruto regime. People should be able to do their work. The Kenya Kwanza government is a whole other government, meaning other arms of government can be able to do their work without being micromanaged. And that is, for me, saying the other forms of government that are not really working correctly. But as collectively as a government, we are able to stand still and say, if the judicial system, let the independency.
Yeah. And Danson, is the rate at which Kenyans are disappeared or abducted or arrested commensurate with the government response required to bring justice to or a closure for their families and their kin?
I would say no. Personally, I have contributed support to the families and individuals who have actually been arrested or abducted. And I do not support the abductions, to be honest. But when you look at the issues that have been happening around abduction, arrest, you have to classify them. And as you asked my colleague there, he was trying to explain former Nandi MP situation. The situation can be different, because let's give a scenario of this person. Maybe the security agents have been alerted this person is going to commit, for example, terrorism activity. How this person should be arrested is quite different from a mere protester with a flag. You know, in where it comes from in the civilized country.
How different should it be?
A terrorist.
Is there class arrest?
No, when someone is, for example, a terrorist,
yeah.
You know, you receive a tip that the person wants to commit, maybe to bomb something. How that one will be responded to, it will be a bit different from an individual who has just tweeted something, you know, maybe against an individual or say the government. Of course, there have been tweeted about the government. Mm-hmm. Normally, there should be a summon, right, and an arrest. Where I come from, actually, the police will come with a warrant of arrest on your door, and they tell you, okay, you have a warrant of arrest from that you're supposed to be arrested. But if the circumstances are different, then the agencies will use a different approach. The agencies, security agencies, have said that the abduction has been some have been fake, you know, people trying to take the situation, and you understand for every crisis, people take different situations at that moment. But we believe that we should not entertain abductions of individuals, and not just the young people who are protesting, even those people who come out to critique the government directly, because we can talk, you can express yourself in various forms. Where I come from, people call the president different names. You know, they say different things to different public officers, because that's why you're a public officer.
That's also done here in the country.
Yes, but differently, you realize that here now, people now get quickly arrested, you know. As long as you're doing something that doesn't cause harm to the nation peace, then it could be freedom of expression. So we need to classify how this arrest should be done. And after all, these guys who were arrested, Ayub, I'll tell you, they go through torture. They are beaten, you know. Some of them actually psychological. After the incidents happened, they never even feel like their bodies are really out of order. Some of them we never know even they will recover from where, you know, after that situation. So it is really brutal. It is wrong. And the president, I know he has pronounced himself that he doesn't entertain abduction, but it should go more to the specific agencies. We have rogue police officers in this country who want to do things to satisfy someone's ego. Yet they know very well there's a code of conduct on how they're supposed to do their business. So it goes to the individual police officer who is arresting, and that is the person actually who's be taken into account in this country.
And Nora, then what happens to the missing Kenyans? So what's the fate of missing Kenyans whose numbers were given by the Inspector General of Police when he appeared before the National Assembly Security Committee?
It's very unfortunate, Ayub, that we still have missing Kenyans. They have never been accounted for, and their families don't know their whereabouts. And we have state machineries that are supposed to account for every individual in this country. I mean, what's the role of government? The role of government, part of this is to provide security for its citizens and to be able to keep a record of all citizens of this country and know exactly who they are and what they're up to. You've seen that previously the government can be able to track any individual from wherever corner they're hiding. You saw how somebody who commented something that did not augur well with the state was arrested in his home, and he said that he had just opened his phone to just maybe pay something via M-Pesa for just about 2 minutes, and the police officers were on his door to arrest him. So this shows that government is able to track these individuals. They're able to know where exactly everybody is. Our technology has grown so much that we are able to use various interventions to be able to know exactly where these citizens are. And therefore, I think when the government now then says that they cannot be able to trace these individuals, then it means that it lacks goodwill from the government agencies that are supposed to take care of these issues. So then this then begs the question, what is the role of government towards its citizens? And then, of course, then now as citizens of this country, we have to definitely, put the government on the spot in terms of what they need then to do for us. Yeah. For example, the Achilles heel, for this government, part of it is rushed decisions in its key policies, for example. We've seen that they have not been very consistent on what they want to do. They have grand plans and desires of things they would want to do, but then Kenyans are saying that realities on the ground are different. Vitu kwa ground ni tofauti. And of course, we know that this government was heavily persecuted in the Rust regime. And when the president was inaugurated, his first statement was that he will never wish this on any other Kenyan. I'm shocked that things have changed. Kenyans are being abducted. What we were promised to achieve, uplifting the hustlers, is not happening. Kenyans are underwhelmed. They don't know what to do. They're disillusioned. They are hopeless. And I think the Achilles heel for this administration then is that they don't know the connection between intent and implementation. They just speak. They just talk. There's this waxing lyrical everywhere. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to achieve. But there's definitely a disconnect between this ambitious rhetoric and tangible outcomes on the ground. So things need to change. Okay, and is it a case of Tunan coming to you, an underestimation of the task ahead, given what the president had told the Kenyan people? Yesterday he said in his speech, as you have pointed out, the war in Europe having an effect on the global supply chain. He denied that during the campaigns in the build-up to the 2022 presidential election. He said he's not going to tax Kenyans. He did so by imposing an 8% VAT on fuel. He promised he would not. And given all these promises, if you put them on a scale, was there a gross underestimation on the part of the government in attending to somewhat the challenges that have been affecting Kenyans and continue to affect Kenyans?
Sometimes you have to differentiate between campaign promises which are not on paper, because the Kenya Kwanza government campaigned on a manifesto that this is what we intend to do for Kenyans. Coming into government, and this was the first thing they said, we found the coffers empty. Finding the coffers empty means that you cannot sustain the economy, you cannot fund the projects that you had intended to fund at that time. Because, once you're out of government, you don't know exactly what is at the treasury, you don't know exactly what is happening.
And that statement was misleading from Rigathi Gachagua.
Until you get there.
The coffers are not empty.
That you will need to clarify that.
Okay, let me point to you.
At least, sometimes...
Okay, let me point out to you,
yes.
Because Rigathi Gachagua misled Kenyans with the tacit approval and the consent, nodding the head to that by President William Ruto on 13th of September 2022, because the economic survey report says that at the time when Rigathi Gachagua made that statement, the country had at its disposal 3.025 trillion Kenya shillings, including revenues and appropriations in aid. So there were no empty coffers at all. So that was not correct. unfair to the Kenyan people?
You know, this now coming back to what you said, you know, the campaign promises, you come to Kenyans and you have to prioritize what is important to Kenyans. You cannot come and, you know, the last regime was heavy on infrastructure. You cannot come back and continue with the infrastructure or start new projects of the infrastructure. You have to complete those projects that were there before. In terms of taxation, you know, and this was a campaign tool for the president. He said we need to reduce our debt burden. And in doing so, we need to fund that debt from our own pockets. And the only way, and you know, government revenue comes from taxes, it comes from borrowing. And to cover that or to bridge that gap, government has to tax. Because you know, you come into government and you find reality of things. This is how we need to do things. To sustain yourself, Kenyans have to build their own country. You cannot depend on debt for all the years to come to fund your agriculture, to fund your manufacturing, to fund anything. So when the president said, you know, this is what we are going to do, he comes into office and realized that to achieve what I had promised Kenyans, we need to tighten our belts a little bit. We need, you know, and you know, change is inevitable and sometimes painful. That is what happens even when an eagle wants to change its beak. It has to undergo a painful process of removing that beak so that a new one grows. And this is the painful process that we are undergoing. We need reforms in our sector. And this, I've seen it as rejection by Kenyans a lot. You see, we are migrating from the NHIF to SHIF. That is an overhaul of the entire health sector. It is painful, and we are going to feel pain for some time before things get well. And I believe that the president has the best interest of Kenyans at mind and heart, and he wants to make sure that by the time his term ends, he has achieved what he had promised Kenyans. If not, we are close to what he had promised Kenyans.
Thank you.
Yes.
And also to just point out, before I come to advice, in the grand scheme of things, the transition to the Social Health Authority, in January this year, Safaricom had proposed 48 billion Kenya shillings to set up the technology required, the infrastructure for the healthcare system. And that when the consortium came in, certainly that number went to 104. So there are questions over the 56 billion Kenya shillings increment, and it's subject to Parliament to bring those things out for clarity of purposes so that the Kenyan people can understand why then the price certainly was inflated under the consortium when Safaricom would otherwise have done what was proposed under for 104 billion with only 48 billion Kenya shillings that we could comfortably pay for as taxpayers in the end. Yes, advice. It seems in the end that governance in Kenya is now at a level where, as the president pointed out yesterday, the leaders are no longer in front of the public. It's the public who are in front and the leadership is back. Are the Kenyan people, in other words, understanding the concept of sovereignty the Constitution grants them and the power they hold?
That is very true, Ayub, because the citizenry as it is today is much, much different from what it was 10, 20 years ago. Today we have a more informed public. So sometimes even before, like you could see what like with the Adani, actually this information was able to get to the public before government would be able to even relay this information to the public. So yes, the citizenry is very well informed. The citizenry is aware of its issues, and as per the 2010 Constitution, and the Constitution is everywhere, and people want know their rights, and there is a craving for people to be very involved in governance. That's why you're able to see what happened with what we are calling the Gen Z protest, because matters of the finance bill, for instance, were previously not matters that really arose a lot of public interest. Many people did not even understand what finance bills are. But today, Kenyans, I see some of your features when you are down in Mashinani in Kisii. Yeah. Like yesterday during the State of the Nation address. And I was actually shocked. I was watching Citizen TV, and there was a reporter who was in Kisii. And this person who was being asked, and this person was just just a trader, being asked, what are you expecting from the State of the Nation address? And this person is able to talk about SHA, this person is able to talk about the Adani deal, this person is able to talk about what you would consider things that will not be percolating down to that common mwananchi. So we have a very, very informed citizenry. And that's why, even as government goes on, it must be able to ensure that you come in tandem with the public. But then just as I finish, Ayub, I like how you are able to emphasize on what the Deputy President said and quoting the report. I would wish that in equal measure of those facts, you highlight the facts about the Jubilee Party. It's a very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that even after my clarification and even after me giving you a Gazette notice, you've continued airing your this show with Angel Mbudia as the National Youth Chair of the Jubilee Party, which is very unfortunate unless this television is on a spree to sanitize and exercise and be part and parcel of the party. If you want to do politics, we can welcome Citizen TV into the political arena.
Point made.
Thank you.
And I'll have my right of reply here. Yes, Mboto, your final remarks.
Coming from that, actually, for me, I would look at it in a scorecard of 2 years, because being able to move from 9.7 to 2.5% inflation, it gives up the difference between having the money to buy 3 meals and not even going hungry. It's a huge difference in that direction. So for me, I'm looking at it at the matters of 2 years scorecard, in a matter of where we are coming from and where we are going. And yes, this is the most informed sea transit we've ever had. Why? Because I believe as a government, we've been able to give out this information adequately, in a manner that now people can be able to understand. I don't think we can be able to say our mothers in that generation were privy to the information that are already there on anything, but we are able to be privy to the information, digitization, the infrastructure of digitalization, the infrastructure of technology. Why? Because our government is very lenient. Our government is being able to give opportunities so that people can be able to get this information. So, and this is the first time we can be able to say as people, sovereignty power belongs to the people. In so many angles, in the way of saying a listening president, in the way of saying that we are moving to that direction. So this is the first time a president is upholding the Constitution in the most edible way, is the most critical manner, in a decisive and intentional manner, to say that we are upholding this Constitution because it's the sovereignty power.
In the end, it's a requirement of him to uphold it. Yes, Angel, briefly, and then I'll come to you.
I think as we are talking about an informed population, this did not happen overnight, because we had great policies like the free primary education about 24 years ago. Yeah. And that's why we have the kind of population that we have today. But then let's also not be oblivious of the global politics of things. Our friends and our partners, the United States, the Germans, the Netherlands, all those countries are now electing more right-winged political parties. And these political parties are all aiming to ensure that they keep in the money in their own countries, and they are cutting down on the international budgets. And one of the people who are going to be mostly affected from that is majorly the African continent, and of course Kenya being part of the African continent. So we also need to be alive to the fact that if we do not strengthen our institutions, we are not going to have very many partners and allies coming to our help or coming to assist us when we make a mistake here and there. If we were to have a pandemic today, it would be a disastrous approach that would be made by this government if this is how it is handling things. So let's be very, very alive to the global politics of things, and see that if we do not strengthen our institutions now, we are going to have problems now and into the future.
Yes, Danson.
I will say this to the president. We have Kenyans in the diaspora who are contributing immensely to this economy. He has a target of 1 trillion Kenya shillings from the diaspora. If he cannot bring the people on the table and actually make pronouncements in this country about how these people are contributing, then we'll feel resented. So, Mr. President, we are urging you that bring the diaspora on the table, discuss with them, and they will help this country to move forward. Just to finish up, Ayub, the transition has never been easy for any cause. It always takes time. There are always challenges, just like the one you are having for the healthcare. I believe the president means well, but he has to package in a way that the population really understand what he looks. Because when it was starting off, you realize the president knows more about shift and share, but the subordinates, the people who are supposed to actually come to the communities down there to tell the people, even the diaspora, they cannot even explain well. So he need actually to reconfigure that part of messaging, and people for sure will be able to accept the changes. Thank you.
So communication is key. Let's now sample the feedback. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422. At Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Here is what you are saying briefly. So we are 4 minutes past The Time, Babu Michael says the president's statement about abductions, forced disappearances and deaths wasn't factual or rather satisfactory. What actions have the police officers he's calling on to act now done about the same issue? Kiza Besigye was abducted here. This is unnamed, says Kenya still has many development issues to address, such as poverty, inequality, youth unemployment, climate change and weak private sector investment. Also, this one from Engineer Lazaro, he says abductions of political asylum seekers breaching international human rights laws. President Ruto needs to embrace culture of proper consultations and needs to consultations here before making serious decisions on national matters. The last one from Esau, he says they talk about fertilizer but never mention the final cost. Seeds are overpriced and they claim milk is 50 shillings. Yet at the farm gate, it's only 30. Our MPs just applaud everything the president says, ignoring the voices of the people. The Kenya Kwanza is all about PR. Two more to go. And Alex Yore says the cancellation of the Adani deal services to show anyone in authority that procurement procedures matter. Transparency is all Kenyans. Okay, 4. I know that the president, or he says President Ruto, cancelled it mainly because the Adani brand suffers a bad public relations in the United States of America. Bob Otieno says cancellation of the Gotham Adani deal came because of an indictment which came from the big brother in the United States of America. The government had already made up working with them, ignored the Kenyan people, and even had a clean bill of health from its unfinished. But he meant government officials, also others, but because of time, we are not in a position to sample them, but we, regardless, thank you for sending in your feedback. And we are some 6 minutes past the time. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for your time. Much appreciated. Mana Sentunen, asante sana, advice Mundalo to you too. Nora Bosibori, Mgeni Mboto, as well as Danson Mukile and Angel Mbodhia. Many thanks for gracing us here with your presence and time. And thanks to you too for waking up with us here on the broadcast. The hashtag on X, Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week here on the broadcast. Till then, good morning.